Did you know that some guy got swallowed by a whale? Or that when a legendary singer died, they had to hire a safecracker to open his vault to access their fortune? Oh, and then there's that drink that comes with a real mummified toe. That sounds crazy, but this is all true. And there's much more to come. I'm Mike with List 25, and here are 25 facts that will make you stop and say, I can't believe I didn't know that. Alright, let's get this one over with first, because it's yucky. There's a bar in Dawson City, way up in the Yukon, where you can order a drink that comes with a real, dried up human toe floating inside. It's called the Sour Toe Cocktail, and it came to be in the 70s after someone found a toe preserved in a jar of alcohol. Someone said, let's serve this in a drink, and a club was born. And just in case you're wondering, joining is relatively easy since there's only one rule. You can drink it fast, slow, with a chaser, but your lips have to touch the toe. And yes, toes have been swallowed. But don't worry, they have backups, which is somehow both reassuring and so much worse. On a totally different note, when we talk about great explorers, names like Magellan or Shackleton are right up there. Robert Peary? Not so much. And there's probably a reason for that. After reading about a failed Swedish attempt to cross Greenland's ice cap, Peary borrowed $500 from his mom and gave it a shot himself. He brought dog sleds, ambition, warm clothing, and not nearly enough supplies. The ice won that round. But in 1891, he went back. This time, he stayed for 18 months and even brought his wife Josephine along for the ride. She later published a vivid account of the whole thing, frostbite and all. At that point, Greenland was still a mystery on the map. Some cartographers thought it reached the North Pole, but during the second year of his expedition, Peary and his crew reached the farthest point north and proved it didn't. Greenland had a border. He wasn't perfect, but he proved that Greenland is an island. And that still counts for something. A bit more recently, between 2020 and 2022, scientists noticed that the Earth was spinning slightly faster than usual. On June 29th, 2022, it actually completed a full rotation 1.59 milliseconds faster than the standard 24 hours. I know, it doesn't sound like much, but it was the fastest day ever recorded, and nobody knows why. Some geophysicists think it's because of shifting mass, like melting glaciers, post-glacial rebound, or movements deep inside the Earth's core. Others blame something called the Chandler wobble, a tiny tilt in the planet's axis that might have briefly realigned our spin. Whatever the cause, if Earth keeps speeding up or just stays unpredictable, it could throw off atomic clocks, GPS, and global financial systems. We might even have to subtract a second from official time, which has never been done before. Now, whenever the words Florida man kick off a story, you just know something bizarre is coming. But this one comes with a detour into body horror. Earlier this year, a Florida man started leaking cholesterol through his skin. And no, that's not a metaphor. He was oozing cholesterol. According to the medical report, he had been following an extreme carnivore diet, eating between 6 and 9 pounds of meat, butter, and cheese every day to manage his weight. As you might guess, his cholesterol was 5 times the average. And when he finally checked into the hospital, doctors found smooth yellowish nodules on his palms, elbows, and the soles of his feet. The official diagnosis? Xanthelasma, a condition where fat builds up under the skin and starts pushing its way out. So yes, you can actually sweat fat. And now you know. Moving on. Do you guys remember the artist known as Prince, formerly known as Prince? Yeah, him. After his death in 2016, his estate ran into an unexpected problem. Prince had recorded thousands of unreleased songs over the years, all stored in a massive vault at his Paisley Park studio. But there was one issue. No one knew the combination. Even Prince had apparently forgotten it years earlier, so they called a safecracker. Dave McCamey, a professional from Oregon, came to the rescue. He used a method called microdrilling to peek inside the lock without triggering a failsafe that would have sealed it for good. The door gave way, and decades of unreleased music finally saw daylight. Or I guess they saw Purple Rain and Raspberry Berets. Like it was 1999. Alright, I'm done. Anyway, what would you say to me if I told you octopuses are basically aliens? Some scientists have seriously floated the idea that their ancestors might have arrived on Earth via panspermia, meaning hitching a ride on a comet or asteroid. I know, it sounds like crazy talk, and nobody really takes them seriously, but octopuses are genuinely that strange. They have 3 hearts, blue blood, and 8 arms that can taste, grip, and think on their own. 2/3 of their neurons aren't in their brain, they're in their limbs. And their camouflage abilities are so advanced, they can match color and texture perfectly while being completely colorblind. They even seem to process visual information through their skin. As if that wasn't enough, they can rewrite their own RNA, a rare genetic ability shared only with viruses, which means they can adapt their biology in real time. Okay, so maybe they're not aliens, but alien enough to make you question how intelligence even works. Then again, did you know there used to be a limited edition Oreo Cologne? In 2018, Oreo China launched the fragrance as part of a marketing stunt aimed at teens and young adults. It was called Oreo Spicy Chocolate Perfume, and it smelled like cocoa, artificial vanilla, and just a faint hint of spice. It wasn't widely sold in stores, but a few hundred bottles were handed out in Asia during live streams and pop-up events where influencers and collectors got a hold of them, and resellers started flipping unopened bottles for up to $100 online. It never officially made it here to the West, but let's be honest for a second. In a world where Cheetos has a makeup line and KFC made a fried chicken bath bomb, maybe Oreo Cologne wasn't the most unconventional idea in the room. I bet it smelled amazing. I would have. If anyone has any, send it to me. Preferably not at $100, but I hate resellers. Alright, here's a fact that'll mess with your timeline of video game history. Most people think video games kicked off with Pong in the 70s, but when Pong showed up, people were actually already used to gaming. They only did it in their labs. In 1958, a physicist named Dr. William Higginbotham was working at a government lab on missile trajectory simulations. But somewhere between all the math and machinery, he realized he could make it fun. So his project became Tennis for Two, a little bouncing dot on a 5-inch oscilloscope screen, complete with a net in the middle. It was never sold, though. Because it was built at a federal lab, the US government technically owned the rights. Classic. Now, before we had joysticks and screens, our ancestors were fighting a much itchier battle. And unfortunately, we're still losing. We recently found out that Neanderthals were already dealing with bed bugs roughly 60,000 years ago. According to US biologists, the bugs originally fed on bats, but somewhere along the evolutionary timeline, they decided humans were the better buffet. And they were right. Their buddies that stuck with the bats started dying out around 20,000 years ago, presumably during the last ice age. So those who latched onto us won, in a big way. Which brings me to the fact that morning coffee drinkers are less likely to die. Yep, best news ever. In a study of almost 41,000 people, researchers found that those who drank coffee earlier in the day had a lower risk of death, both from cardiovascular issues and from, well, anything. The morning crew was up to 31% less likely to die of heart disease and 16% less likely to die overall compared to people who sipped all day long. And while the biological reason isn't totally nailed down, it might have something to do with late-day caffeine messing with your hormones, sleep cycles, and inflammation. Or maybe we're just looking at long-term consequences of too many espresso martinis. Either way, your AM cup of joe is looking pretty heroic. Of course, not everyone's morning routine involves coffee. Some people, and apparently some raccoons, are on a slightly different track. On May 5th, 2025, police in Summit County, Ohio pulled over a car with actual picket fences instead of passenger windows. Behind the wheel was 55-year-old Victoria Vidal, who had a suspended license, an active warrant, and a raccoon riding shotgun. And not just any raccoon. This one, named Chewy, was found sitting in the driver's seat with a certain glass accessory in his mouth, and a second one clutched in his little paw. Now, I can't tell you everything they found in the car because YouTube has rules, but let's just say it was the kind of inventory that would make a small-time dealer jealous. Vidal was arrested, and Chewy, who was legally registered as a pet, was turned over to a family member. And since I'm on the topic of questionable decisions, let me tell you about the time a woman technically won the lottery and still walked away with nothing. Back in 1980, a New Englander named Maureen Wilcox was living near the Massachusetts-Rhode Island border. She reportedly loved playing both state lotteries, so one day she bought tickets for each, and somehow, against all the odds, she picked the winning numbers for both. There was just one problem. She picked the Massachusetts numbers on her Rhode Island ticket and the Rhode Island numbers on her Massachusetts one. So even though she got everything right, the results didn't count. The next spot on today's list goes to a construction project that's been underway since the 1800s and still isn't done. It's called the Sagrada Familia, and it's a massive basilica in Barcelona that broke ground in 1882. The original plans were pretty standard, but then Antonio Gaudí took over and spent the rest of his life working on it, carving Christian symbolism into the walls, designing twisting columns and wild nature-inspired shapes that somehow look like trees, bones, and beehives all at once. Gaudí died in 1926 with the church still unfinished. Then, during the Spanish Civil War, his original models were destroyed, setting things back even more. Decades later, architects were still piecing together his vision from scraps and photos. Luckily, thanks to modern technology, the pace finally picked up, and if all goes to plan, they'll finish it in 2026. Just 144 years late. And then there's the fact that snakes are actually full of cool colors we can't see. Most animals rely on color to survive, whether it's to hide, warn, attract a mate, or just look mildly terrifying. But humans only see a narrow slice of the color spectrum, which means we're missing out on a lot of what's going on out there, especially when it comes to snakes. Many snakes are covered in ultraviolet patterns that are completely invisible to us. These UV markings probably help them blend in with their environment, especially in forests where lots of plants reflect UV light. It also helps them avoid predators like birds. Weirdly, however, the colors don't seem to be about mating. Male and female snakes have the same UV patterns, which just means, for snakes, looking good might be less about attraction and more about, not getting eaten. And just to balance things out, from one of the most advanced survival tools in the animal kingdom to one of the most tragic human ways to go, did you know you can die from picking your nose? In 2008, a 63-year-old man named Ian Bothwell was found dead in his Manchester flat. He lived alone and had dementia. When he didn't answer the door, the building manager checked and found he had bled to death. The coroner ruled it a severe nosebleed, in this case, specifically caused by picking his nose. Yeah, it's not really a visual I want to spend too much time on either. Our next spot goes to the 2021 disaster that left Facebook locked out of Facebook. On October 4th, 2021, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and pretty much everything Zuckerberg adjacent went dark. Billions of users were locked out. Internally, Facebook employees couldn't message each other, open work tools, or even badge into the building. The culprit? Someone misconfigured Facebook's BGP routes, basically the map that tells the internet where to find them. And it got worse, because the fix required physical access, and the doors were controlled by the same broken system. In trying to build a super streamlined, ultra-secure network, they accidentally locked themselves out of their own infrastructure. They eventually got back in, but wow, what a faceplant. Still, if you think getting locked out of your office is rough, try getting swallowed by a humpback whale. That's exactly what happened to lobster diver Michael Packard in June 2021 off the coast of Provincetown, Massachusetts. 1 second, he was swimming about 10 feet above the ocean floor. The next, everything went dark, and he realized he was trapped inside a whale's mouth. Packard thought he was going to die, but after about 30 seconds, the whale surfaced, shook its head, and spat him back out. Experts said it was just a feeding accident. Humpbacks aren't aggressive, and when their mouths open up to scoop fish, their vision gets blocked. Be that as it may, Packard definitely walked away with one of the greatest "you won't believe what happened to me" stories of all time. Alright, it's tough to top that. Unless, maybe you're the real-life inspiration behind Don Draper. And if you just said, Don who? I'm sorry, we can't be friends anymore. If you haven't seen Mad Men, do yourself a favor and cue it up. The show's a love letter to mid-century advertising, full of terrible morals, impeccable suits, and an unforgettable main character. But what most people don't know is that Don Draper was based on a real person. Draper Daniels was one of the most influential ad men of the 20th century and helped shape campaigns like the Marlboro Man, which turned filtered cigarettes from a ladies' product into a rugged American icon. Daniels wasn't just a creative point guy. He was the pitch. The charm, the swagger, the name, all straight from real life. Far from the world of tailored suits and ad campaigns, there's a place where you can book a stay next to an actual troll's cave in the Arctic Circle. Munchausen Island, off the coast of northern Norway, is a former fish trading post that's now a remote getaway surrounded by jagged cliffs, icy fjords, and one very ominously named landmark, Reshola, or the Troll's Cave. According to local folklore, the cave was once the home of a massive troll who roamed the fjords until the rising sun turned him to stone. Some people believe that his spirit still lingers near the cave, and some locals claim you can hear low grumbles echoing from inside during winter storms. Others say the rock formations nearby are his frozen body caught mid-step. But the island isn't just famous for the cave, it's the cabins. The glass-fronted, stilted structures are perched right over the shoreline, giving guests a front row seat to the northern lights and the kind of silence you can't recreate anywhere else. Activities include sea kayaking, mountain hikes, sauna plunges, and in true troll fashion, sheep watching. Not exactly what you call fine dining, but hey, sushi didn't start that way either. The original version, called narazushi, was less about flavor and more about keeping fish from going bad. People packed it in fermented rice and left it to age for months. Was it tasty? It's probably debatable, but it worked. Over time, that preservation method evolved. In the 1800s, a man named Hanayoe started serving fresh fish over vinegared rice, a faster, fresher version we now know as nigiri sushi, and it caught on fast. By the late 20th century, sushi was suddenly everywhere, from California rolls in grocery stores to omakase counters charging hundreds of dollars a head. It started as a survival trick and ended as a high art. Human creativity takes many forms, from crafting omakase menus to outlawing the sale of eyeballs. Yeah, in Texas, it's illegal to sell your eyeballs. I know, it's a bit bizarre, but it comes from the right place. The law is part of a broader ban on selling human organs thanks to the National Organ Transplant Act of 1984. But for some reason, eyeballs get called out specifically, probably to head off any particular ambitious entrepreneurs, I think. While the intention is serious, the phrasing has unfortunately made it internet famous. No one's sure if anyone actually tried to sell their eyes in Texas, but just in case, don't. And while Texas is keeping an eye on your eyes, Japan has been busy guarding what might be a centuries-old mermaid skeleton. According to the legend, a mermaid washed ashore at Hakata Bay in 1222. A local shaman declared it a good omen, and its remains were buried at Ryuguji Temple, which, by the way, literally means undersea palace of the dragon god. Over the years, it's said that visitors were offered water that had been soaked with the mermaid's bones, believed to protect against disease. Today, 6 of those bones are still kept at the temple, worn smooth by centuries of water and superstition. As for what they really are, some scientists think the bones might belong to more than one animal, and at least one theory says that Mermaid might have actually been a land-dwelling cow. So, less aerial and more beef. Carambola sounds a lot more elegant, but it's just the scientific name for starfruit, which, unlike cows pretending to be mermaids, can actually be dangerous. While most people can enjoy starfruit without a problem, it contains high levels of oxalates, compounds that healthy kidneys can filter out easily. But if your kidneys are damaged or compromised, those oxalates build up fast, and that's where things get risky. It can lead to confusion, persistent hiccups, seizures, and in severe cases, even death. Researchers also blame a neurotoxin called caramboxin, which overstimulates the brain when it isn't properly cleared from the body. The danger is real enough that people with kidney issues are advised to avoid starfruit completely, which is a shame. They're so pretty, but no snack is worth a seizure. And number 2 on our list today, let's talk about the Hajj Pilgrimage. Every year, over 2 million people travel to Mecca, all moving through a tight, shared space. In the past, it's led to horrific logistical issues. But even more importantly, to stampedes and death. Now, you might think the logistics are just about food, transport, and a place to sleep, but you'd be wrong. These days, it includes motion tracking AI, GPS-based heat maps, real-time aerial imaging, and even drones that scan for distress using thermal sensors. During peak hours, foot traffic is monitored second by second. Pilgrims often wear electronic ID bracelets linked to their visa and health records. Inside the Grand Mosque, signage changes by the hour, barricades shift to redirect flow, and announcements go out in multiple languages. In 2023, engineers had to reroute thousands of pilgrims in real time when one passage started to overload. It's the ultimate version of high-stakes crowd control, and they managed to get it right. And finally, let's end this list on a high note. And I mean that in the craziest, most literal way possible. On April 19th, 2025, a man aboard an EasyJet flight from London to Marrakesh suddenly leaped out of his seat and started yelling that there were snakes on the plane. Not Samuel L. Jackson snakes. Real ones. Or so he thought. He claimed the snakes on his shirt had come to life and were crawling around the cabin, prompting him to panic, shout, and become so aggressive that the flight had to be diverted. The plane made an emergency landing in Faro, Portugal, where police were waiting. As for the snakes, well, as it turns out, they weren't real. The man was reportedly hallucinating, possibly from a mix of alcohol and illegal substances. So yes, technically there were snakes on the plane, but only in his head. And on his shirt. And that's a wrap. How much fun was that? But wait, before you go, here's a quick quiz. Who proved Greenland is actually an island? Is it A, Ernest Shackleton, B, Robert Peary, C, Roald Amundsen, or D, no one, it is a government cover-up? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're in the mood for more, why don't you check out our related video, 150 mind-blowing facts you won't believe are true. It comes with screaming plants, goats chasing college degrees, and coffee-saving naps. No jokes. As always, thank you for watching. Hit subscribe, ring that bell, and I'll see you next time.